Today's going to be a really fun session. What I want you to do is, if you can, I want you to get a pen and paper, and we are going to work on overcoming failure. Now, this is a journey. This is a process. It's not something that's going to be healed, and it's not a quick fix. It's not something we can overcome in a day, because no matter how old you are, you've got a certain amount of years of training in being afraid of failure, in wallowing in failure. So we kind of have to train you out of that way of thinking. Now, the beautiful thing about improv comedy, the beautiful thing about improvisation is when we improvise, the part of the brain that lights up, the part of the brain that really activates when we're improvising is our prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that is responsible for creative flow. It's the part of the brain that lights up when we meditate, when we pray, and the part of the brain that goes quiet is the self-sabotage center at the back of the brain, the self-sabotage center that says, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, I'm afraid of failing, so why even start? Now, my journey as a professional comedian and an actor meant that I have dealt with failure loads, okay? As a comedian, you're on stage, you're testing material for the first time, the material doesn't work out, and those first few deaths, those first few failures, there's a reason they call it death, is because it feels so bad. It feels like a death, okay? But what starts to happen is when you fail big and fail often, you eventually become more comfortable with the failure, and you eventually learn through improv comedy techniques as well to separate yourself from the failure, to say, cool, this project failed or this joke failed, rather than I'm a failure. So the first step to embracing failure is recognizing not only the power in sharing our failures, but the power in making light of our failures, not taking our failures so seriously. So today, what I want to do with you is I would like to create a failure CV. Now, you're probably saying, what is that? But that is basically a resume. A resume. And at the top of this piece of paper, I want you to write your name. I want you to write failure CV underneath. And as far back as you can remember, I want you to go back and I want you to list all of your failures. Okay? From pre-birth, if you can remember that far. Whatever you feel is a significant enough failure to be holding you back in your life in some way, I want it on that failure resume. Right? Once you have written, in 2004, I failed in this way. You are then going to write the lesson that you learned and the door that failure opened. Now, this should be easy the further back we go with the failures, because the failure is much easier to recognize in hindsight. So this should be an easier exercise to do with failures that happened in the past, rather than failures that you are going through at the moment. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Start from as far back as you can remember and work your way up. But I want every single failure on that failure CV, and I want you to put in as much detail, as much effort, as much pride in this CV as you would as a normal CV. As if you were looking for a big job, okay? And this CV is going to stick with you forever, okay? This is a really powerful exercise that I actually stole from a student of mine who went to Harvard, and he said they were doing this failure exercise at Harvard. And I was like, if it's good enough for students at Harvard, it's good enough for my students too. And this exercise, doing it myself, having my own failure CV, but also working with my students to create a failure CV of their own has allowed my students to truly succeed in whatever business they're in. And the reason why, because they do not see themselves as unworthy, rather they can separate themselves from the failure. So this is why this is such a powerful exercise. So I'll give you an example of a failure that I had where I used the CV, and on hindsight, how it actually changed my career. Okay, so I think it was 2012, as I said, I'm a stand-up comedian as well. Trevor Noah was coming back to South Africa, maybe it was 2015 actually. Trevor Noah was coming back to South Africa, and he had chosen 10 of the country's top up-and-coming comedians to be on a show which would then be on television and would be broadcast to the entire country, the entire world. And I was not chosen for this top 10 comedian show. I was devastated. And when I say devastated, I mean I was curled up in a ball, feelings of unworthiness. I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes. I should just quit comedy while I've just started out. This is obviously not the career for me. And although it took me a while to get back on my feet and to get back to feeling comfortable and confident enough in my ability to perform, that trauma that I went through with that failure was so necessary, because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be on national television and to be showcasing my comedy, because it wasn't good enough. And it wasn't good enough because I hadn't found my authentic voice. So, in hindsight, looking at that failure, I am so grateful that it happened. I am so grateful that it didn't happen for me and I didn't get in, because it forced me to re-look at my comedic style, find my authentic voice, and to become a far better comedian for it. So this failure CV is a powerful way for you to get over failure really quickly. I should say bounce back from failure really quickly, but also to become hugely resilient. Hugely resilient. Because if we can start to look at our failures as opportunities, as moments in our lives that we can use as springboards, rather than moments in our lives that are holding us back and preventing us from living the life of our dreams because of fear, there's nothing stopping us. If you guys would like a template, a failure CV template, I've created a template for you. All you need to do is join our free improv comedy community. We can talk about things, where we can get together, discuss our failures, where we can become really resilient, and we can work together to use improv comedy techniques to become the confident, incredible people we dream of being. Have a beautiful morning. I will see you here next Thursday.